Hey guys, how's it going? This is the Ball Metal Nerd coming at you with another lovely vid, and you already know what this one is. Basically, I am making this in response to a video that Kris at Dixieland Farm just did called Why I Use Linux. So I'm going to talk about the oh so uncommon practice of using Windows. And just to point out just how wrong Kris is, because this is the internet, right? And if you do something differently than somebody else, whoever does it differently than you is automatically wrong and automatically a bad person and is automatically dumb. We need to remember these things, right? uh, that be all that being said, Kris is a great guy and he's got an awesome channel. If you like any VC or music stuff, definitely check him out. If you haven't, I will link his channel in the description below. He's a great guy and a lot of fun to interact with. So basically, let's really get down to it. Why do I use Windows? Well, I use Windows for the same reason I use Linux on my smart. All right, I said Linux. Android on my smartphone. Okay. Funny I said Linux because obviously, if you guys don't know, Android is built on top of Linux, basically, and it's open source and all that, just like Linux, which gives Android a ton of flexibility. So if I like Android so much, why don't I use Linux on the desktop? Well, because a desktop laptop is not the same thing as a smartphone, right? A smartphone, there's a lot of things I don't do with it that I do on my regular computer, right? Tons and tons and tons of things. The biggest reason I generally stick with Windows is software availability, right? There are tons of programs that I personally really like to use, and they, are free and high quality that aren't available on Linux for whatever reason. The most prominent one that I'm looking at my taskbar right here, I'm looking at two. I'm looking at Music B. That's Windows only. MP3 Tag, I believe, is also only Windows. Now, there are obviously programs on Linux that have that same functionality, rough equivalents of them, but it's once you get it's kind of inertia, right? Once you find software you really like, you tend to stick with it, right? So software support is probably the biggest reason, and of course that does include video games, right? But I don't have to play. My laptop is pretty lightweight and doesn't play games so well, so I don't ever play games on a number of my systems. In fact, I only play really on my main desktop. None of my other computers do I even care about their gaming capabilities. That being said, that is a big deal. Linux still isn't there. And the final third reason that I use this wonderful product line is basically hardware support, right? Now, I know Kris said that a lot of hardware is supported in the kernel and doesn't have drivers per se, and that's absolutely true. But I have a fair amount of hardware that I've tried over the years that just does not work in Linux because of however crappily designed it is. It's used to some proprietary chipset or something that's closed source, right? That the engineers, the designers, whoever can't figure out how to make it work in Linux. And it's usually obscure stuff like bizarre Wi-Fi adapters or some graphics cards or whatever. So, but there are definitely things that don't work in Linux hardware-wise. In fact, in my limited ecosystem here I have in my home, there are several pieces of hardware that I just can't get to work in Linux, no matter what, with a fair amount of Googling and all of that. Now, all that being said, Does the average person need Windows? Absolutely not. The average person doesn't need Windows or Linux. In fact, I would say 95% of home users would probably be perfectly served by Chromebooks, because what most home users do are all internet-based activities, right? And if all you do is watch goofballs like me on YouTube, Facebook, email, online shop, online bank, whatever, if everything you do is internet-based, you don't need Windows or Linux. You only need an operating system like that if you actually use local applications on your computer. So anyway, those are my reasons why I largely stick with Windows, despite its problems, despite the fact that I have to activate the software. But cost isn't really a factor for me with Windows. The last time I paid for Windows was actually, I haven't bought a copy of Windows since the Vista days, of all things. This copy of Windows 7 out here I got for free from Microsoft back in the day, and I got a free upgrade to Windows 10 when 10 came out. And I have this copy of Windows 8 that I got from work. It's one of my jobs some time ago. So that key also activates Windows 10. So, I probably have several other keys I could use to activate Windows 10. So as far as monetary cost, I'm not really putting anything out. Now, that being said, there are some definite disadvantages to Windows over Linux. The biggest one, of course, is the vulnerability to viruses. Pretty much all viruses, well, the vast majority of computer viruses are targeted towards Windows, and very, very few are ever written to target Linux. So that is a giant advantage for Linux over Windows. And if you are a total geek nerd and you just want to modify the source code or view it or do whatever, that's a lot easier in Linux than Windows. And of course, there are some annoyances with Windows, especially Windows 10. Things like, automatically downloading crap apps, like Candy Crush and all that. And the advertising and the tracking is worse in Windows. But despite, all of that, if you dig through the settings, if you're nerdy enough to know that these are problems, you're probably nerdy enough to know how to get around these problems. So anyway, that's pretty much it. If you like this, thumbs up. If you hate me, thumbs down. Share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to check out Kris's channel if you haven't. See you guys next time.